Tonight, Idahoans stood vandal strong. Vigils were held on the University of Idaho campus and at schools all over the state to honor the 4 young college students who were killed on Sunday, November 13th. News at 10 anchors Brian Holmes and Morgan Romero were there, and they are live in Moscow tonight outside the Kibbe Dome where the vigil was held earlier. And Morgan and Brian, it looked like a big crowd showing support for sure.
Yeah, they stood vandal strong, but they also stood shoulder to shoulder, filling up half of the football field inside the Kibbe Dome. Thousands of people showing up from around the community here. And of course, it was an emotional night, of course.
Yeah.
We heard from the president of the school, Scott Green. We heard from the dean of students. And we also heard from 3 of the victims' parents. Of the 4 that were killed 18 days ago. It was supposed to be a candlelight vigil, but because it was held inside the Kibbe Dome, they weren't allowed to have candles. So everybody had kind of an app they could download on their phone. And they could hold up their phone and kind of simulate holding up candles during the moments of silence.
Right. And before we take you inside of that vigil, there is something that we want to address before we get to those powerful stories and the words shared by the parents. We brought you an interview earlier from the Latah County prosecutor. I sat down with him this morning, and he told me that law enforcement has consistently said that this attack on the 4 students was targeted. He told me that investigators believe this attack was targeted because it was targeted towards a specific person who lived in the home. Meanwhile, he told a separate news outlet yesterday that targeted may not be the best word and that maybe the attack was focused on the house as a whole. Okay, so telling me that it was focused on a resident, telling somebody else it was focused on the house. Well, now he's backtracking that and saying he actually misspoke. His name is Bill Thompson, the Latah County prosecutor. He misspoke and he apologized. He sent a letter tonight and he corrected himself. We want to show you what he said. He said, quote, "We want to let you know that there was a miscommunication between detectives and my office. To clarify, investigators do not believe the murders were random, but we cannot unequivocally say the residents or any occupants were specifically targeted." Moscow PD also told me conflicting information has been released over the past 24 hours. Of course, they're talking about what was told to one outlet and then what was told to us. They said they spoke with the prosecutor's office and called it a miscommunication. They said, quote, "Detectives do not currently know if the residents or any occupants were specifically targeted, but they continue to investigate."
And that's something they've said from the very beginning, however, that this was a targeted attack. And they kind of stuck through that up until this point, apparently.
Exactly. And even though they don't have a suspect in custody, it's important to note, like I said, they're saying it's not necessarily random. They are still maintaining that it was targeted and isolated. There is still a threat clearly to the community because the suspect is still at large.
Okay, so that's the latest on the investigation. But tonight was, of course, about the tribute to the victims and their families inside the Kibbe Dome.
Yeah, very emotional. Like Brian said earlier, we heard from 3 of 4 of the victims' parents, and they shared stories, they shared memories, they shared what they really wanted the community to know and remember about them. But the way that the vigil ended was in a beautiful moment of silence for the victims. Take a listen.
Xana Kernodle. Ethan Chapin. Kaylee Goncalves. Madison Mogan.
That was the end of the vigil tonight, but from the very beginning, we could tell this was going to be an emotional night. Ethan's mom, Stacy, was on hand. She was one of the first parents to speak, and the minute she stood up there, and the first thing she said was, "I am Ethan's mom." And emotionally, you could see she started crying and breaking down. And from that point on, we knew that this was going to be very tugging at the heartstrings and really kind of, there was some moments of laughter, but there was also these heartfelt moments like, again, Ethan's mom saying, this is a time to remember that every moment with your kids is valuable and I took a couple of notes, spend that time with your kids. But Steve Goncalves also mentioned that, you know, this is the one thing he wanted people to learn from this is to remind everyone what we lost in these last 18 days. And that the 8th wonder of the world is the relationship between a father and his daughter and sharing the stories of her and their relationship. Madison's dad got up there saying she was the first granddaughter, their only child. And he mentioned her boyfriend, Jake. And he said, I was glad that Madison at least got a little taste of what love is like
Yeah.
in this life.
And on top of the parents who you'll hear from in just a moment, we did see Marlene Trump there, the
Yes.
BSU president. We saw Governor Brad Little there, other elected officials as well. We saw sorority members, sorority sisters of the victims. We saw Sigma Chi brothers and other fraternity members at the University of Idaho. With the Greek life being so close, we saw the football team, students, alum, everybody hugging, really embracing each other. A lot of tears tonight. Again, the parents sharing stories of what they want everybody to know about their kids.
I want everyone to know that these girls were absolutely beautiful. They had been friends since 6th grade. We both put them in a charter academy. They felt like they were being punished. 6th grade, they just found each other, and every day they did homework together. They came to our house together. They shared everything. They convinced us, they made a proposal to go to high school, to a regular high school. So then they went to high schools together. Then they started looking at colleges. They came here together. They eventually get into the same apartment together. And in the end, they died together.
Maddie Mae, she was the first granddaughter, grandkid of any of her grandparents. She was Karen and my only child that we ever had, and so she got, everything she ever did was such a big deal, and she was just such a happy, such a great kid, such a perfect little baby, and so just smart and funny and beautiful. She was just nice to everybody.
The circumstances that bring us here tonight, they're terrible. The hardest part, we cannot change the outcome. And as a family, as a Chapin family, it's important that we share Ethan's legacy and talk about the impact that he made in his young 20 years, or his short 20 years. So this is where we choose to focus our energy, because we are now Ethan's voice.
And Brian, I talked to students ahead of the vigil just to get a gauge on how they were feeling and why they were there. They said they showed up because this is really the only way they felt they knew how to show up for the families and the victims, and to show their support and to bring some semblance of closure to the family and to the community. And they said it was amazing to not only see vandals and vandal alum and staff, but to see just people from all over the community of Moscow and the surrounding areas there as well. So many of them, as you've been reporting, decided to come back, while others decided to stay home and finish out the semester online.
True.
Others were not able to do that because they had to stay here and work. Those are some of the kids that I talked to today, and they said over the past 2.5 weeks, this has rattled the community, and tonight, without a suspect in custody, they are still shaken.
Because people just don't want to be out after dark. It's been pretty rattling, I think, for everyone.
Yeah, it's like we're all terrified. Like, our group was somebody who went down to the bars a lot, and none of us want to go. We're terrified to leave, our houses. None of us will go by ourselves. I know where I live is I always lock my door, and then I put a chair in front of my door just in case.
Yeah, Moscow has always been so safe, and I know personally that I lived somewhere that, we didn't really always lock our door, but now it's like, lock your door, deadbolt, make sure the windows are locked. We've gotten a little bit scared, I think.
Yeah, it's terrifying. It's something that you wouldn't expect to happen here or anywhere.
We hear that over and over again as we've been reporting on this story, Brian, over the last 2.5 weeks, that nobody expected this to happen here. And we also know that not every student feels that way. Some are carrying on, they're going out to the corner club, they're going back out on the streets, and they're continuing on this semester. And
Dr. Blaine Eccles also said, the Dean of Students tonight, be that light for each other at this time. Ethan Chapin's mom saying, this is the time to remember to be kind to each other. And so we're seeing a lot of that coming back into play here, being in the town of Moscow and on the campus of the University of Idaho. Other people who couldn't make it here tonight, I know there were other vigils around the state, both down in Boise and also around, even around the country, because they were encouraged. Vandals, obviously they spread out from here, but vandals around the country were encouraged to turn their porch lights on and show solidarity and show their support. And a lot of people did that around the country.